Alright, what's going on, guys? I'm now going to break down for you my opinion of the mechanism of chronic tinnitus. Now, I made this myself. It took me about 2 years to really piece together, and it took me about 6 weeks to try and put all the pieces in there and find a really, it really is an oversimplification. And because of that, it's confusing. Because if you don't understand all the mechanisms, if you don't understand, for example, how mold ties in with light, and how fascia ties in with the nervous system, and really where everything stands and how it really ties in with one another, then this is going to be meaningless to you. I mean, anything you might just scroll by it and think, what's the point of this? It looks kind of cool, but like, how do I understand it? How do I implement it? What does it mean? Okay, so I'm going to break it down for you. And it's simple now, but I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I can. This might be a long video. I might just break down a couple of the mechanisms because there's more than one way to get tinnitus and there's more than one way to fix it. And unfortunately, that, in my opinion, is where the fallacy lies of tinnitus. So if you go to an ENT or a doctor, they're going to tell you it's because of broken hair cells. If you go to a tinnitus expert on YouTube, they're going to tell you that you have to be relaxed. Okay? Both of which are total horse shit. Now, in terms of relaxation, there is a time and a place, and it does absolutely play a role in tinnitus. So let's talk a little bit about this. Well, you can't see my screen, but on the picture you'll see the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about how the thyroid ties in with the parasympathetic nervous system. Actually, let's talk about how the functionality of hearing works. So hearing, okay, is vibration, which is energy, that travels through the air in waves, gets caught in your ear, goes in your ear canal, reverberates on the eardrum, hits the malleus, incus, and stapes, which pushes on the cochlea. Now it is inside that cochlea where the hair cells and the lymph and potassium ions and salt exist, okay, of which the electricity is made, okay, and it takes a lot of energy. Out of all the five senses, the ear requires more energy than any other by a shit ton, okay. So you need electricity to power that. So let's have a look at the stress response of, for example, you might have found yourself that people say to me, Liam, I go to a doctor and they give me the bad news that it's for life and my tinnitus gets worse. How does that happen? And then people will think, oh, well, I looked on YouTube and I found someone talking about how I need to relax myself and meditate and come back into the moment and stuff like that. And then it gets better. And that is absolutely true. But why doesn't that work for everybody? Why are there still some people out there who try all the relaxation techniques and nothing happens? For example, I had a lady come to me who got tinnitus from benzodiazepines, and she tried, relaxation techniques from tinnitus experts who do get good results. She tried relaxation techniques for 2 years, got 0 results. As soon as she started trying my advice, her tinnitus went down from a 12 to a 3 in 3 days, and there's a video testimonial of her saying that, and she's over 40 years old, okay? So I don't really know what anyone else's excuse is. So, but why is that? So let's talk, and let's get a little bit technical, and I'll use this diagram, so follow along with me. Let's talk a little bit about how I just talked about the functionality of the ear, but where do we get that electric charge from? Because we need power to convert, to use potassium ions to convert, okay, vibration into electricity, pass it through the neurotransmitter into the brain. We need a shit ton of power to do that. So where do we get the power from? Okay, so inside the hair cells, inside each grouping of hair cells, you have multiple mitochondria. Inside those mitochondria, you have membranes. And inside those membranes, you have 3 electrons. And as I've said before, those electrons, okay, have 3 of them, okay, 2 of them get their electricity, their power from the sun, and 1 is from nutrition, okay? But in my opinion, not one is more important than the other. You still need a lot, but it just goes to show that we need sunlight, okay? We need a lot of sunlight, and you can't get sunlight if you're eating fruit because then you're consuming sodium salicylate, which is actually going to make sure your DNA gets ruined every time you're in the sun. It's a defense mechanism from plants. Anyway, so you understand, right? Like the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell, the more sunlight and proper nutrition you get, animal products, the faster your ATP spins, okay? And the faster that it spins, the more power you get. And that way you can actually convert external noises into the phenomenon of hearing. And why is that appropriate? because the noises we hear outside are actually 20 times quieter than how we process them. Not only do we need to hear them in the first place, but we need to amplify the shit out of them, okay? Why do we do this? Obviously a defense mechanism. So what really is tinnitus when we come to that? Well, you could argue that tinnitus is your body, it's a warning signal, right? It's your body saying there is something seriously wrong. We're having trouble amplifying the noise. Soon, you're not going to be able to amplify the noise. Now, the mechanisms may have a problem as well. That's certainly, you could have a calcium deposit on the bones. You could have a calcium deficiency. You can have calcium efflux. You can have all sorts of problems. But what happens when you're stressed out? Okay, let's talk about ECT, electron chain funneling. So let's try and use this graph here. So we have light on the right side, okay? And then we have that tied in nicely with cortisol, okay? Makes sense? So cortisol is the stress response. Cortisol is the fight or flight mechanism. And that is also tied in, okay, with mitochondria, which you get from your mother. So that's really just supposed to say mitochondria, but it's important that you know it's from your mother, different video altogether, okay? And thyroid, which is actually the gland right here, twice as big for women, that controls the fight or flight mechanism. Now, let me say that again. The thyroid gland is the number one regulator of the fight or flight mechanism. Now, what will inhibit that from working? Okay? Two main things. Halides, so bromine, and plants. Okay? See, as you can see here, they're tied in. The mitochondria and plants are tied in with the thyroid, which is connected to the cortisol, and cortisol, of course, is regulated by light. Cortisol and melatonin are hormonal. Melatonin is responsible for sleep. Cortisol is responsible for waking up. You need both, but in the right amount. Just as you need certain gut bacteria and just as you need candida, but if you have an overflow, it will be bad. For example, if you take a quinolone antibiotic, or you will kill all the bacteria to such an extent that candida will, so all the cells in your stomach to such an extent that candida will begin to become too powerful and strong, and we'll go, fuck this, I'm going to the brain, and it will do that. It will break the blood-brain barrier, okay? Blood-brain barrier, especially if you don't get enough sleep. So where was I? What happens to the cells in your ears, the mitochondria? What happens to the membranes when you get stressed? Well, the skinny of it is they lose their capacity to process noise and create energy. But the actual fact is, scientifically, when you look at it through a microscope, which I've never done, but I've seen other scientists much smarter than me do, it's called the rate of heteroplasmy, okay? And it actually causes, there's no perfect circles in cells, but it causes the mitochondria to do this. And unfortunately, that causes the efficacy of the 3 electrons, which is supposed to be responsible for causing the ATP to spin. It causes a compromise. So you lose that ability to amplify the noise, okay? Hyperacusis, and you lose the ability to hear in the first place, okay? And you don't have enough energy, okay? So let's look at that on the graph. So obviously my screen is I tried to record my screen before and my computer just literally turned itself off. So there's a lot of videos on this. So we have also tied in there with cortisol too is noise, okay? Because that will, what are we born scared of? Heights and loud noises, okay? So it's going to ramp your fight or flight mechanism up. So how do we, if we try to de-stress, which you all should, because I just said it affects it directly, you should de-stress, but then how could that possibly be the be-all and end-all of the cell? Especially when we look at mold, especially when we look at blue light affecting sleep. It just doesn't make sense, and it's actually not true. Stress is not the be-all and end-all of tinnitus. If you're trying to beat your tinnitus by just de-stressing, I would say there's actually a fairly good chance that you could do it. You could potentially do that. But those people who don't succeed come to me, and then we do this, and it's just fucking wham, how quick it is, okay? It's just this, because why not do it both? Now, you're probably wondering, okay, Liam, well, what do I do? Well, let's talk about grounding as well. So let's talk about light. So let's talk about light and grounding, and then I'll probably end the video because otherwise it's going to get too full on. So light and grounding. Okay, so when I'm talking about light, I'm talking about blue light from this computer, and I'm talking about UV light from the sun. I'm like one of those airplane people, ready for takeoff. Anyway, so let's talk about blue light. As you get because light travels in particles and waves, what happens is you get it through the photoreceptors in your skin and in your eyes and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, okay? And there are multiple ways that this can cause problems. The cells in your ears that I told you about, they need to be recycled every single night. Now, there are two kinds of sleep. There's NREM sleep and there's REM sleep, non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement, okay? Now, you can still dream when you're Matthew Walker accordingly, so you can still dream when you're in non-REM sleep, but the real healing and the fixing of the brain goes on during rapid eye movement sleep, which is when you're doing these and if you ever look at the research on auto eye accessing cues, the FBI actually uses, if you look at an interrogation properly done, their eyes will be monitored because they'll sometimes look different ways and access either future projection or they're scared or whatever it is, they look different ways. And you will do that when you're asleep to help open up those memories. And it's proven, it's really interesting, and they help detect when people are lying using it, okay? Anyway, so if you do something like you drink coffee or you have caffeine, so that's tea, coffee, dark chocolate, some women's birth control pills contain caffeine, some drugs contain caffeine, guarana is also one as well, not as potent as caffeine, but you see what I'm getting at. You will actually, through adenosine, I believe it's called, the hormone of adenosine, you will block the melatonin receptors, okay, in your pineal gland. Okay. Now your pineal gland once again is responsible for regulating your thyroid, which is responsible for regulating your fight or flight mechanism, which is responsible for regulating the heteroplasmy rate inside the mitochondria, inside the electrons, okay, inside your ears, which is responsible for making electricity. So if you're not healing the cells and you're not getting sunlight and you're drinking coffee, you're so fucked. You are so fucked. Okay, and that's just the truth of it. You need to listen to what I'm saying and watch my other videos and just start, okay? Start by cutting out, speak to your doctor first, obviously get their permission and actually do it, because you could have something in your medical history that I don't know about, and also you shouldn't just stop taking your drugs. But I hope this is making some sort of sense, because it's very important that you get this. And one more thing, if you're a musician and you wear earplugs at events or gigs, I'm sorry, but it's not good enough, because you can still process noise through vibration in your skull. Now, deaf people actually use mechanisms that hook up to certain parts of their skulls so they can amplify that into their ears. Instead of trying to catch the noise in the air, okay, and then put that into your ear, which they used to do with the horns, what they do now is they literally try to catch the vibration on the bone. They can sometimes drill into the bone, catch the vibration and amplify that, similar to a record player, okay, and put that into your ear because it just works so well. So this is why so many musicians come to me and say, Liam, every time after a gig, I follow all your advice, but every time after a gig it always spikes. That's because your ear is still getting a workout. You haven't got the proper nutrition. You need those membranes we spoke about. You need cholesterol, and you need animal fats, and you need animal protein. Plants are not going to cut it. With every single plant, there's a bigger downside than an upside. And please do your own research for yourself. And if you're just going to comment and go, oh, that's makes no sense, what about a balanced diet? Then that shows that you don't know what you're talking about. Because we're not trying to do a balanced diet here. We're trying to do the tinnitus diet. We're trying to fix our tinnitus. And you've probably had a balanced diet your entire life. How's that working for you? Did it work? Did it prevent tinnitus? I don't think so. Remember, we spoke about 2 electrons coming from sunlight and one of them coming from food. Remember, everything in the world is made up of electrons. So food, therefore, still emits light. And the food that emits the best quality light is always animal products, okay? It's the blood, it's the heart, it's the liver. The liver is the most valuable, of course, and that ties into it as well. But you can see here what I'm talking about. And if you look closely at this and you read it a few times, you'll see that it's all connected, okay? Now, I consider just listing them off like this, but I think if you take a second to read this and learn it, then you'll actually see that it makes sense, okay? And so why do I think this works? Because when people come to me, I don't really care how they got tinnitus. Now, there's differences for genders. For example, a woman, you would not believe the amount of pregnant women or women who just gave birth that come to me with tinnitus. Because, of course, they've given all their iodine and their selenium to their child. And the iodine is the fuel for the thyroid gland, okay? And selenium helps fuel the thyroid gland and the brain and the pineal gland. And that's going to help regulate the fight or flight mechanism. And if that's going out of... So what I mean by the fight or flight mechanism being regulated is if you're always stressed out and freaking out, then something is wrong. You shouldn't be feeling that amount of stress or anxiety. It should hit a certain level, and then your body, your consciousness in your body kicks in and goes, maybe we shouldn't freak out about this. This is not worth freaking out about. Okay, most people would have you go on to benzodiazepines or drugs, which literally strips the power and poisons your thyroid, which is responsible for fucking regulating those fucking feelings in the first place. Go figure, right? Psychiatrist, well done. And other tinnitus experts will have you just try to relax when they don't understand the fucking science behind this. This is it, as far as I can see. And now, as I said, I don't know if I tried to film this video 3 times. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm going to be in Melbourne in about 27 days. If you're in Melbourne or you know someone in Melbourne, please get them to contact me. I'm going to be giving a talk for about 2 hours, breaking down everything in this little graph. This was just a really shit basic introduction, but I'm going to be breaking down everything in this graph over the space of 2 hours. And normally it's something that people pay a lot of money for, but 2 hours is not long enough to explain all this stuff. So I'm going to give you a basic introduction, but you still get to meet me, and it's free. That's pretty cool, right? So if you're in Melbourne, do that. This is just a basic introduction. If you want to know where to start and you're just like, what do I do? The first thing you got to do is you got to get permission from your doctor. Take this with you. Print it out and take it to the doctors. Post it on your Facebook. I don't care. Share it with the world. It's free. Just use it. Get permission from your doctor, your psychologist, your psychologist, whatever, especially if you're under 18. You need permission from your mum, obviously, or dad, or whatever. And then start applying the stuff on this graph. So get sunlight. Cut out the oxalates, cut out the cruciferous vegetables, cut out the sodium salicylates, cut out the carbohydrates. You need to get your mitochondria, once again, used to processing fat, lipids, right, instead of carbohydrates. And it's going to take a while, especially when you cut out plants, you're going to have an oxalate dump. So you've got to wean off the plants. It's going to take time. Okay, anyway, so that's really a brief introduction. I kind of bounce from thing to thing, but I just want you to get one takeaway, and that is that if you believe that stress is the only way to get rid of tinnitus, or it's the best way, it's completely wrong. There's nothing to back it up, okay, that it's the only way. Sure, it works for some people. I'll absolutely grant that. It's absolutely true. There's no debating that. Of course it does. But why not do everything else at the same time and speed it up and get a better chance of silencing your tinnitus, hyperacusis, pulsatile tinnitus, or vertigo? Getting rid of that popping or clicking. I don't even know if it was in this video or the one I tried to film before, but I had a guy he just silenced his hyperacusis and he got rid of the popping and clicking in his jaw. By doing what? Did he go and see a dentist? No. He just cut out vegetables and got 3 hours of sunlight a day. How fucking hard is that? It's the easiest thing in the world. He didn't even eat grass-fed meat. That's the easiest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Hyperacusis, pulsatile tinnitus, and the clicking gone. That's pretty easy. Now, of course, it's going to be different for everybody. And he was taking iodine as well, okay, because he had a swollen thyroid gland. So now there's much more to this. For example, there's parasites, there's noise, there's mold, there's stress, there's a lot. Okay, there's a lot. So it's kind of like a process of not elimination, but building up things. And the first place to start, as I always say, is just to get rid of all the drugs. Get rid of all the foods that are causing lactic acidosis. Candy, Snickers, alcohol, bread, wine, tobacco, marijuana, illicit drugs, ecstasy, cocaine. If you take any of those, just give them a rest. And don't look online for ways to justify your habits. Wine has antioxidants. Well, funnily enough, the best antioxidants in the world come from the ground. And the antioxidants from fruits and vegetables are not even available. Plants' defense mechanisms, they make nutrients either available so you can't have them. For example, iron. If you can't get heme iron from plants, and we need heme iron. And vitamin A, you can't get retinol. You got to have vitamin A. People don't understand this. They go through a list of plants, or they go for a plant. Let's say I got broccoli. It's got so much. It's got my 2 pieces of broccoli have my recommended dosages of vitamin A. Well, no, they don't, because it's not retinol. It's in plant form. You can't actually process it. But you know what it does have? It has one of the highest amounts of sodium salicylate, which is going to mean that, guess what? If you're in the sun, it's going to tie in it's a photosynthesizer. So whenever you put your skin in sunlight, it's going to literally attack your DNA. It ties them up. And also you're going to get rashes and you're going to get burnt easy. And as we said, what's 2/3 of getting your ears back in power? It's sunlight. And there are people out there saying, oh, just drink coffee or like do what you do and like feel happy and blah, blah, blah. And the unfortunate thing is that works because of the heteroplasmy rate. But unfortunately, they're always probably going to have tinnitus and they're going to think like, oh, there's no cure. You can just learn to deal with it. You can just learn to deal with it. No, I don't want to hear anything else. I don't want to hear the truth. I don't want to hear the truth. And they just learn to deal with it. And then they go online and tell everybody else, no, you have, they're like these little demons in the fucking internet, like, oh, you have to learn to deal with it. There's no cure. And really, they don't put any effort into learning. They don't want to hear anything else. And you know what? They just want to be able to come home and have their fucking Hungry Jacks and their beer and think that they're doing the best they can because they want to hide from the fact that they're shit. Okay? Enjoy. Reaching out.